When the beta comes out for America, should I play as a male or a female? I like playing female because I mean, let's face it, girls are pretty, and I like pretty things. But I also don't like want to really make sure I get into it and I'm not like distracted by like the most thickest thighs I've ever seen in my life. Kusic here, and I just wanted to let you know that all the clips in this video have been taken from my Twitch down in the description below. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and comment something nice down below as it helps grow my channel. Thank you. I'm really excited for this game. Unfortunately, the beta for the game did come out, or the server testing, or the testing, whatever, only came out in Japan. Unfortunately, I don't have a VPN, so I couldn't get myself into the game to really try it out. So, but I did actually do the character customization, obviously before that beta came out, so I was able to get my hands on it just a little bit to see how the custom characterization is, and it was really dope. I really liked it a lot. So I'm really excited to hear about this game, and also I want to hear on its review. I might not play it all the way. I'm probably gonna play halfway before we move on to the next thing we're gonna be reacting to today. But definitely, yeah, can't wait to see what it's all about.
I played 40 hours of Blue Protocol this past weekend, deep diving as much as I possibly could to learn everything about the game, so that I could provide you guys with a full review. Now, right out the gate, I do want to say that I did think that this was a good game and it had a lot of potential. However,
awesome, guys, that's everything that we needed to see. Let's go ahead and move on to the next. Nah, I'm kidding.
There are a couple of major concerns I have about this game. So in this video, I'm going to be addressing those concerns. I'm also going to be addressing everything else, the good, the bad, everything in between. This is going to be my honest review of this game. If you guys do video helpful, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It'll help me reach my goal of 100k subs, and I do plan on continuing to cover Blue Protocol content as much as I possibly can.
If you don't know what Blue Protocol is, it's a new anime
I would love to get
that's
to know
coming
you guys
out
personally,
sometime
and that's
this year.
The best way to ask me
looks
questions.
really sick.
Let's begin the
So
video.
we're watching an honest review about it.
I want to start by painting you a general picture of what the experience will be like playing this game. Blue Protocol is a true anime MMORPG, but the best way to describe this game at a core is that it feels like a mix of WoW Classic, Tower of Fantasy, Dark Souls, and Final Fantasy XIV.
Did any of you guys play those games? Any of those games at all? I think we talked about earlier about not... This name makes me think of Blue Lock. Blue Lock? How is Blue Lock? I've never seen it, but I never played WoW. I think we talked about that earlier, right? I never got a chance to play WoW at all. I did play Tower of Fantasy for just a little bit of time. I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't too bad personally for me. And maybe I'll make a separate video about it, but the story itself wasn't really like keeping me hooked. That's the one thing about a lot of MMO games, is their story. That's mostly what you do immediately to get to the end game. If that story sucks and you can't make it through that story, man, you are not going to get to the end game. You are not going to be wanting to buy like the best characters, or especially if it's a gacha game, like you're not going to be wanting to buy the best characters. You're not going to spend money. You're not going to invest if you can't even like, even as a free-to-play player, if you can't get through that main campaign, you can't get through that main story, like you are not... I think you guys can resonate with this when it comes to like Genshin Impact, right? With Genshin Impact, right, I mean, to be completely honest, it does farm really well when it comes to Genshin, because obviously there are some people that get on Genshin strictly for the banners because the characters look really dope, or like they're super hot or something like that, or cute, and they want those characters really bad, so they don't even, like, half the time they'll just get on there just to get those characters because it's so like it's not an MMO. And that makes a lot of sense. Genshin can kind of get away with that, unlike other MMOs, for example, like Tower of Fantasy, right? But the problem, again, like with all these other MMOs, including like even though Genshin's not an MMO, it could have been if it really wanted to, in my opinion, but it's not. But it's similar in terms of like an RPG, right, where you kind of get in and as a gacha, right, but you get in, you know, you go through the story, you complete this, you complete that, and you kind of like hit this like really dead area, right, where you've been there for so long, and then out of nowhere you're just kind of like, I'd rather be doing something else. It's a little bit more action pace, and I have like ADHD, so like my attention span is like super small, right? So when I get in there, like I'm hoping for a story that really like captures me, keeps me involved, you know, keeps me hyped, and then keeps me wanting to play all the way up to the end game of the game itself. And Tower Fantasy just didn't do that for me. Genshin has yet to do that for me. But then again, I'm looking forward to like trying again on that to see how that goes. So, and maybe I'll make a YouTube video about it. Honestly, if the game has amazing gameplay, but it's supposed to be a game with a narrative or story that's horrendous, it's usually a drop for me because I can't get invested in the characters and such. I completely agree with you, bro. Kazoo, I completely agree. Because if a story sucks, the gameplay has to be amazing, like actually amazing, or like the visuals just like have to be overall. Genshin is just like Breath of the Wild, right? Obviously because they took a lot of their assets came strictly like literally from Breath of the Wild, and though the game is good because I love Breath of the Wild, I actually beat Breath of the Wild, but the difference is the story in Breath of the Wild is so much richer than the story in Genshin Impact. And I know that your lore and the story of Genshin Impact is better outside of the game, not in the game. You play the game and you're expecting like an insanely rich story. You're not going to get that except for like these really like low ball cutscenes that are like they're cool, but like I mean, like it's a band-aid for a gigantic flesh wound that's only gonna satisfy you and, you know, get a little, you know, come out the tip. You're not gonna be satisfied and like happy for like the rest of the hours that you have to play this game outside of a cutscene. And that's just the thing that's wrong with Genshin. Like you need games that include that story inside of the game itself, and not on the outside. Though I do agree that it's the great. Now the story is great except for Inazuma. I need to educate myself most likely I will educate myself in the game when I want to get really proficient at like knowing like precisely, I would say, like lore, or like getting my foot in the water in terms of like knowing these games. Definitely, like that's one of the things I'm most excited about, is being proficient in my knowledge of these games and being able to have like actual like discussions and debates about the game itself. Even though like I know how the Genshin community is, those dudes can like kill me. Dude, I can educate you on the lore. Join the Discord, and then we'll talk in there, and then we'll talk in there in the Discord, and then you can tell me all about the lore. They're scary. I'm excited. No, you have me excited for Genshin. I'm more than happy to do the Genshin. Maybe next stream we could do it. I wouldn't mind. It'd be a good idea. I just gotta write a story about it and see how it goes. But no, that's awesome. But just like Kazoo said not too long ago, definitely super important to have a great story. If you don't have a great story, at least have great gameplay. I remember when I played Lost Ark. I mean, the gameplay was really good. I actually genuinely liked the gameplay, but it just got to a point where like it felt like almost a whole 5 hours to 10 hours of the game was like a big ass tutorial. And I mean, it's a big game. I cannot lie. It's a big game. So I understand it, but man, the story didn't just have like enough that kept me hooked. But then again, I'm still more than happy to get back into Lost Ark. If you don't know about Lost Ark, it's another MMO, kind of like top down, like Diablo. Also a pretty good game. I heard a lot of people really like the game, but I'll definitely be more than happy to check out that game too. But for right now, let's continue on with this review of Blue Protocol.
Put together. WoW Classic in terms of pacing.
Also, I heard Final Fantasy 14 was dope, but
the progression and leveling experience was a very, very slow one in the beta test. We'll talk more about this later, but there are a lot of elements that will give classic WoW.
Bro is fighting monsters in their underwear. Shameless.
Vibes. For example, every single mob being an actual fight that you can't just face roll over. Tower of Fantasy in terms of look and animation. Outside of the vast anime-inspired world, the combat with games like Tower of Fantasy and Genshin Impact are action combat and will have you perform combo-based attacks using a lot of your left mouse button and right mouse button. These attacks have long telegraphed animations that can look pretty flashy. Dark Souls in terms of difficulty and, well, the combat. This may take a lot of people by surprise, but the combat felt very single-player action RPG-like. In Blue Protocol, taking damage hurts, and you won't be one-shotting anything. There's a huge emphasis on manually dodging attacks and not getting hit, but we'll get more into this later as well. Final Fantasy XIV, in terms of the social aspects,
I love that
Japanese
so much, man. Like all those players in the background,
the class system.
like just able to hang out in the social hub,
along with your starting class. Your class can be changed at any time after level 5 by simply equipping the respective weapon, identical to Final Fantasy XIV. When beginning your journey, you'll level up to around 10 by completing quests and completing your adventure boards, which are similar to...
When the beta comes out for America, should I play as a male or a female? Let me know. Let me know if I should play a male or a female, because I'm really stuck in between. Like, I like playing female because, I mean, let's face it, girls are pretty, and I like pretty things. But I also don't want to really make sure I get into it and I'm not like distracted by like the most thickest thighs I've ever seen in my life that I personally made for myself. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a really tough decision. So we'll see in the future.
Adventure journals in other games, journals that have a separate list of missions for you to complete that provide rewards. Once doing so, you'll be able to craft and obtain your first real major upgrade, which is your weapon, along with other items you'll craft to enhance your character's power. As you progress, you'll unlock more content, mostly dungeons, which will be gated by your item level. You'll have a lot of stops in your journey where you'll be grinding away to upgrade your gear via crafting.
Actually, I don't mean to pause, guys. I don't mean to keep pausing, but guys, if you ever find a moment in this stream that's funny to you or that's a solid moment, don't be afraid to clip the stream itself. It'll be super helpful for me when I try to make my content, and it helps me find these really good moments that I may have forgotten about, that you were involved in, that you would like me to post somewhere. So I mean, always don't forget to, you know, clip if you find something funny or anything like that. It really does help me out a lot.
Order to progress further. This whole process essentially repeats itself with your next tier weapon coming in every 10
I can't wait to play
levels.
this game.
All this while you go through a pretty good anime storyline that seems to be pretty epic, especially since a lot of the scores are from the same guy.
Look at that animation, dude, for the cutscenes, dude.
Upon hitting the level cap, you'll be able to access a variety of dungeons and instances. World Boss, Tower of Beginnings, Rush Battle, and regular dungeons were the end game for our beta test. I say upon hitting level cap because these are the things you'll be doing at level cap, but they are actually gated by gear score, not your level. For those of you who are curious, Tower was a game type where you climb floors, completing objectives on each floor with boss fights every 10 floors. Rush Battle being a wave clearing instance that you can even compete against other players.
It does sound pretty high,
World
doesn't
Boss
it?
Being, well, just the world boss.
Look,
only
oh my
not
god,
in the
look
world,
at that.
But in an actual instance.
Look at all
Overall,
those players.
Blue Protocol is definitely
boss,
not
dude.
an
This gives me like
game. I'd argue
Sword
that
Art
it's
Online
actually
vibes,
quite
dude.
difficult for the average gamer, and I'd suspect new players to die or get lost a lot. You feel a lot of the old school RPG elements with Blue Protocol. There is also a huge benefit in partying up and having friends to play with. You can 100% play solo, but your progression will definitely be slower. Generally speaking, this is the game in a nutshell. There are a lot of things that I want to share with you guys, so I'm going to be breaking them down into individual sections in the video, starting with the world. First and foremost, Blue Protocol is not an open world MMO. It certainly feels and looks like one, but it's not. Each area is separated by zones that you'll load in and out of. However, I can't stress enough how gorgeous this game looks. The graphics, the look.
So I guess my understanding from that is when it comes to the zones, I want to play this now, but I don't know if it'll fit my computer. So what you can do, there's actually a benchmark. If you look up Blue Protocol benchmark, you can actually already download the custom characterization and also test to see if your computer can handle. It'll give you'll run through the process, go through some cutscenes, some in-game scenes, and then it will give you an overall score, and it'll let you know if how it's looking, and you know, let you know if it can run it or not, so that you can be fully prepared for whenever the game comes out. And plus, also there's a feature that when you do make your custom character, you can put them in the world and take some screenshots to like share on Twitter or something like that. So pretty sweet, actually, if you actually you know, really think about it. But this actually does remind me, when it comes to zones, it does remind me of Genshin, I think, if I don't remember. It's not. No, Genshin's completely open world. That's right. I believe it is completely open world, except for some obviously some areas when you load into dungeons or things like that. So my understanding of this is like when it comes to the zones, is you level one zone, beginner, it has a certain type of difficulty, and world bosses. You load into another zone, and then it might range via being harder or easier to get into. All right, cool. I think that's dope. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. It's honestly not a problem for me. Maybe some people might have an issue. I don't personally have an issue with that.
For me, it really feels like you're part of a living anime world, especially with the social aspects. The world isn't small, but it isn't incredibly large. We only had access to a few zones, but I could tell by the world map that there was potential for a much larger world. The zones we had access to, despite the game looking gorgeous, did start feeling a bit repetitive.
You look like a girl.
You feel completely immersed when you're in the major city, but you lose it a bit as you go through the leveling zones or Blue Protocol's quote-unquote open world. You didn't feel like you were immersed in a vast world like you would in World of Warcraft, but it also wouldn't feel like you're playing an MMORPG on zone maps like Elion either. Honestly, it felt somewhere in between. Role-playing is also absolutely a thing in Blue Protocol. I mean, it's literally a concept option that you can select when creating or searching for a guild. From being able to hold hands with other players, quick emotes and stickers that you can send on the go mid-combat, and of course a big photo-taking mode, this game will really hit home for role players or just anyone that loves an emphasis on social aspects in an MMO. The anime theme isn't for everyone, but there are a lot of people that have been wishing for a true anime MMORPG for the PC, and Blue Protocol is just that. I had two major concerns going into Blue Protocol. One was the endgame loop, which we certainly did not experience in the level 20 beta test. The other was the combat. To be perfectly honest, I was a bit skeptical with how the combat looked, especially having a big background in Lost Ark and Black Desert Online. After playing this game extensively, I was pleasantly surprised as to how good the combat actually was. The more I experienced it, the more
because I would say that the combat itself, worried me because definitely Genshin had really lackluster combat, but I am aware that when it came to Genshin's combat, the combat was really like switching to your other characters to do a type of a big grand synergy type of combat effect that looked really cool, and that was the really fun aspect of the combat. But if you didn't get that immediately, then like it was like no shot. You did not enjoy yourself. Too tough. Just simple. Bonfire gang turns out ready to something in the cafe game. Thank you so much, Kazoo, for that. I'll definitely get on that. Probably whenever the stream's over, I'll make sure I update that. Definitely, for sure. Elemental resonance and stuff. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think that was like the most like the fun part of the combat, which is kind of like standing there, use one ability, change character, use the other ability, change character, use any other ability, things like that. But I definitely like feel like that's like, not to be like lazy or anything, but I'm not used to it fully. So obviously I wasn't like too much of a big fan of it. Definitely feel like if I played longer and I had more characters that were more like in sync with each other, I definitely probably would fall in love with it. But I never made it to the end game, so I didn't get to see like the, oh my god, I did so much damage, that's badass, or you know what I mean. So I never got to that part. But this was one of the things I was worried about when it came to Blue Protocol, that it was gonna be like your ult, one ability, second ability, and then, you know, that's it, dodge. But it's cool to know that, like, from his review at least,
the reason for this was definitely because of the Dark Souls-like challenge. Rather than being just a regular action combat spam fest, Blue Protocol places a large emphasis on being able to identify enemy attacks and dodging them. This completely changed the dynamic of combat because fights became very challenging. There's a funny meme our community made about the mobs in Blue Protocol, but it's actually very true. Even a basic mob at level will be a challenging fight that you can even die to if you're not paying attention. You cannot mindlessly spam your attacks because they have animation logs, and you can't afford to take damage since one blow can take up to a quarter of your health. you have access to a lot of stamina,
little
which
worried about
allows you
that
to pretty much
when it comes
dodge
to a
roll
challenge.
iframe at will.
Challenge
And
is
the combat
good,
in
but
Blue
too much of a
Protocol
challenge
revolves
too
around
soon
this
can wear up a
feature
lot of players.
and places a very high emphasis on it. You also have to pay attention to the attacks each mob has, since they are all unique to each individual mob. Some will run away and cast magic on you, some will literally backstep dodge your attacks, some will have different wind-up times to their attacks, baiting you into dodge rolling early and smashing you after your iframe. This
dope.
places an
That's
even
cool.
greater challenge
I
when
really
you're
like that.
training mobs trying to kill multiple at a time. Outside of the graphics and the look of the game, the biggest W was definitely the combat for me. Classes in Blue Protocol are definitely unique. It's pretty clear they're trying to mix interesting combinations with their classes by having a gunhammer class or a ranged bow healer. Each class in BP did feel different to one another. There were clearly roles for each class, and each one performed their roles in their own unique ways. For example, the Twin Striker, which is your dual-wielding axe class, was designed with the intent of constantly attacking with high uptime and faster animations. The class mechanic was that of a combo system where you deal increased damage the more uptime you have on your target. Then you have the mage class where you have literally 0 cooldowns, and your class mechanic revolves around you manually regenerating your mana, which is what you burn using your skills. My only gripe with the classes is that they need more variety. I might play a mage.
That looks sick.
I believe the classes at the moment aren't enough to scratch the itch for other players who may not be interested in playing a typical mage or may not be interested in the unique hybrid bow healer class. This is something that will obviously be guaranteed to get better, as I'm not expecting a BP to only have 5 classes forever, but I do wish they had more options with classes available to inspire people to play.
The start of the game never looks too amusing, but like they always keep the secret of the end game like completely out.
It would have certainly raised my addiction level to the game. I would love to see a great sword, or my personal favorite, a gauntlet wielding
that's something that's really cool about this game.
As stated in the beginning of the video, I have a couple of major concerns that I feel could have a devastating impact on this game.
You can't play the one class and completely like switch your
by saying this is a game that I am very excited and hopeful for. I'm expressing these concerns not as someone that's bashing the game, but as someone who's trying to provide objective information on a video game as a content creator while providing real feedback and sharing his honest opinion. I wish nothing but the best for this game, and I do plan on playing at launch and covering this game extensively.
I will be playing this game at launch.
It's a great game with potential, but I feel the following information I'm about to share leaves me questioning whether this game will be a game that lasts the test of time. A lot of the game's success will revolve around its end game, which we are yet to see, but the gearing process and itemization for all MMOs is also very important, and we did get a preview as to how that's set up in this beta.
Let me read this real quick. Weaponcraft great success decided by lottery. So there's a little bit of a gamba to upgrading your weapons maybe? Successful weapon craft increases special effects and number of sockets. Okay. All right, guys, just pretend we know what we're looking at, okay? Just nod. Yes. Yes. Makes sense. Cool. Definitely. All right, moving on.
The test. The first thing to understand is that the overall pace of the game is just very slow. The leveling is slow, the upgrades are slow and small, killing a single mob takes time. To put things into perspective with an example, there's no passive regen in the game, meaning when you take 3 hits from a mob and you need to heal because you're at 25% HP, you'll have to find an actual campfire to sit and replenish your health at, because pots are extremely expensive and limited until level 10. Of course, this also depends on your class, but in the early game at least, it does slow down progression a bit.
Yeah,
you don't have any items I was just about to say that, like food and WoW, that just will about to say that this health
it's
either.
okay.
You
it's
also
a really
have to
cool
be very
mechanic
careful with what you're spending your gold.
I think it's a cool mechanic because it does like make it a little bit more of that RPG, right? That role play feel, right? Like you don't just go and like you're just a goddamn tyrant going off, destroying everything in your sight, like speed running through the game. Like there's moments where you do need to like sit down, take a break, get your health. I love that. But if you are like a streamer or content creator and you're really trying to like speed along the process to get to like, for example, the end game, right? Because you want to be the first person to put out content for that game, that's going to hinder you a lot. like having to pause to heal up or stop what you're doing. But then again, it's really good because maybe it'll help people who naturally just try to rush through the game take their time and really like soak up at the game instead of like beating it like their first week, and you're like, oh, this game sucks, there's no content, I'm all out of things to do, there's just no like dude, slow down, you know what I mean? Take your time with the game, enjoy the game before it's over, you know what I mean? Because then you gotta wait for like updates and then new stuff to come out, and then you're gonna end up in the end game cycle, which, fingers crossed, I mean, it's really good. So I mean, but
gold
you
on
get what
what
I'm saying.
upgrades you're actually making. Messing these things up may not necessarily ruin your character forever, but it can and will set you back hours. If you're thinking, well, that's only until level 10, know that it currently takes 4 to 10 hours just to hit level 10. I should say, however, after finishing the main story quest line, every quest suddenly gave 10x the experience, allowing the journey to level 20 to be significantly faster. I'm not sure if this was by design or deliberately juiced for the sake of the beta test after finishing the campaign, but I'm inclined to believe it was just juiced for the beta test. I've heard the original alpha test in December was very fast in terms of progression, but the latest version of the game showcases an extremely slow one. In fact, it's probably the slowest MMO I've ever played, including Classic WoW. However, slow doesn't necessarily mean bad. There's a reason why Classic WoW is one of the all-time greats. The concern for me is more so the substance in that slow journey. In Blue Protocol, you have your main campaign quest, your side quests, your adventure boards, and dungeons. When you progress through your main campaign, you will hit walls with your gear score, forcing you to focus on your adventure boards. Main story campaign and side quests do not provide you with anything other than experience and gold. The gold currency, by the way, is called Luna. Dungeons can provide experience, gold, weapon mats, and something called plugins, which we'll talk about in a bit. Starting with the dungeons, to be perfectly honest, I would say my experience with what was available was just mediocre. The dungeon experience wasn't bad, but it got pretty stale and started to feel a little bit spammy relatively quick. I will say though, you shouldn't look too much into this because these are just level 10 to level 20 instances. Next, we have the adventure.
Because that's one of the things I'm always worried about, man, is like those stagnant, like really boring, like dead air feeling type of moments when playing these MMO games. And I know it's unavoidable at some point, but like at least I want it to be like some type of like a dopamine rush or like some type of an addictive. I think the way I personally feel is like these dungeons, like even though they're small dungeons, like they should reward you with a large amount of something, like where when you do these things, like, yeah, you may not get like world's best gear, right? But like maybe you are giving, you know, something, you're getting something that's like a certain type of currency that's harder to get later on in the game or early game, and when you're doing this and you're actually like grinding this thing out, maybe you're getting your foot a little bit ahead or through the door in terms of end game, right? That would motivate me to do a lot of these smaller dungeons while I level up, because I know like, hey, I'm doing this for a purpose. The more I grind this out, the later in the future this would be helpful, especially like in some cases where you're going through the story and like maybe there's a moment where you're not high enough level, you're having a little bit of a hard time, you're able to go and do those dungeons, get prepared for later in the game, and then obviously get yourself to that point where you're at the requirement gear level, or gear level, or, you know, experience level to do that said mission. So that's just how I personally feel. I think like that would be something that would be really good. Maybe they'll do that, maybe not. Either way, you know, we'll see how that
board, which is essentially an adventurer's journal with a series of missions that you'll complete for rewards, specifically gear recipes and crafting mats. This is your main form of progression in regards to your actual character power. Completing these boards will unlock new gear recipes along with some mats to craft them. They also sometimes provide passive bonuses that increase the amount of rare jobs you get from specific mobs. This can be pretty significant considering what I'm about to tell you, so keep this on the back of your mind. All gear is crafted via an NPC in Blue Protocol. These missions always consist of the same type of objectives, which is to kill X amount of mobs, obtain an X amount of rare mats from a specific mob that drops it at a low rate,
Cool.
Gather X amount of resources. Obtain an X amount of rare mats from harvesting a resource that has a low chance
That's gonna be so
dropping.
sick.
The problem is that the drop rates of these rare mats are extremely low. It took me over an hour just to go from 4 out of 9 to 5 out of 9 in the quest tracker. It got to the point where I was thankful if the mission objective was to kill 60 mobs and not collect 5 rare drops. If I had to guess, I would place the drop rate around maybe 1 to 3% tops before any loot rate buff based off of my own experience and feel. You know it's bad when your Twitch chat begins to question whether something is bugged or if you're even farming the right mob. So if we were to streamline this, you're doing your campaign and side quests for the purpose of Luna and experience. While doing this, you also need to upgrade your character's power, which is the point of the game. This is done via the adventure board because the game doesn't give you any gear or power via drops or quest line. On top of this, the dungeons will also contribute to your mat farm specifically for your weapon. All of the gear in Blue Protocol is crafted, and in order to craft those upgrades, you'll complete the missions from the adventure board, which will take you hours to complete. And the upgrades you do get outside of your weapon will boost your gear score, but you won't really feel significantly stronger considering the small amount of stats those upgrades provide. Keep in mind, we're not just talking about mid to late game here. We're talking about levels 1 through 10 as well. The single biggest issue to this progression path is not actually the amount of time it takes you to level up. It's the tasks that you have to complete to upgrade your gear. Another problem is that the adventure board does...
Big advice, Big advice you need to keep in mind when these things happen. There's always a way where you can progress and do things a bit faster. There is always a way. Keep in mind, like, this is an honest review, right? But once this game gets in the hand of a lot of other people who will play the game, there is bound to be someone who will know like the most common areas of when to get a certain type of recipe or get a certain type of item and things like that. In my opinion, unless you're a content creator, I highly recommend just pausing for a minute, just wait for a good video to come out. When you get to that point, enjoy the game and then watch those videos, right? And then go ahead and go about your way of collecting these resources. Whenever you don't have that access, it can be tough to find these resources as fast as possible, especially when it's like this filler, right, that keeps you from progressing into the story. Definitely you can feel a bit of a burden, right? But I always keep in mind that there will always be some type of content creator who will find a route or an easier way of doing something that will benefit you as a viewer or as a player of the game. So I always keep that in mind.
Doesn't even always provide you with all the mats needed to craft your piece, meaning I had to continue farming the mob anyway, and the board was only providing me with a few mats to contribute to my craft. So let's say you've now just killed 300 mobs to craft your piece. You see your gear score go up a little bit higher, and your next mission is to do exactly what you just did again, then again, then again. Once you finish your campaign, you'll continue the same loop that I just explained all the way to endgame in order to further boost your gear score. After getting my first significant upgrade at level 10, knowing that my next significant upgrade would be at level 20, and I'd be repeating the whole process of what I just did again, the thought of this was honestly a bit daunting for me. Japanese players that could read the game with no problem and were progressing
a hard time if you're like a full-time worker or you go to school or college, like
8 hours or so.
You're gonna be doing more grinding than you actually will be playing any type of like
to the rare mats
content that you
have
enjoy.
To farm. In my opinion, they 100% need to increase this drop rate significantly. Keep in mind the experience that I had where it took an hour to get a single mat drop was actually with a loot rate buff they provided for us. Despite me referring to gear on a few occasions in this video, in reality, there is only one piece of gear in the game, your weapon. There's no armor in this game, period. Outside of your weapon, your power or stats come from 7 Imagine slots. You
No
can think
armor?
of these as just enchantments in the form of equipable summons that are applied to
Do you
your
guys think
character.
the way
5
they
of
make
these
the, 'cause this is gonna
imagines
be a
are
free to play
strictly
game, do you guys
just
think the
passive
armor
stat
is gonna be
while
cosmetic?
the other 2 are
that's what you pay
active
for?
summons that
And
you
the
can
weapons are
use
in-game?
as a skill along with the stats it provides.
So it's not
These
like a pay to
imagines
win,
are crafted
maybe?
at an NPC and require a recipe to show up.
Interesting.
These are the gear recipes I was referring to earlier that are obtained via your adventure board missions. Once unlocking the Imagine recipe, you'll be able to craft them with mats that you'll farm from mobs and life skilling. You can also obtain select Imagines as rare drops from certain mobs or field bosses, but you'll be mainly getting these via the adventure board. Every single Imagine will require at least
I don't think all of them will be
2
cosmetic,
rare
but
drops
some
from
of
a
them,
specific
yeah.
mob
That's what I'm
or
thinking. So
resource
I don't
to
mind
craft.
cosmetic,
Meaning in
but I
order
wonder,
to
like,
upgrade your character
they're
by
gonna increase these
equipping a
drop
new
rates
Imagine,
that
you'll
they're
have to go through the
experiencing
same process
by spending
every
money
time.
that you can progress
Grind
faster.
mobs
Like you pay for
and
your
gather
time.
resources until you receive all the mats needed
So you
to
can go, like,
craft
to the
that
end game
item.
sooner. I
As
hope that's not
mentioned
the
before,
case,
the
but
missions you do in the adventure board
we'll have
to
to see
unlock
in the
the
future when
recipes for
updates
the
come out.
Imagines will also have you do the same thing: hunt mobs and gather. Despite raising your gear score via these Imagines, the only time you really feel a significant
Yo,
boost
look at
in
those frame
performance
drops.
is when you upgrade your weapon, which you'll do once every 10
got a little
levels.
slow, huh?
Considering this game is paced extremely slow, you will not see those upgrades for a long time. The weapons are obtained in the same fashion as your Imagines, but they do come with some additional upgrade options. The itemization here I'm about to explain is my other main concern with Blue Protocol. You can apply what's called a plugin on your weapon for additional effects or stats. You can look at these as just gems applied to your weapon. These plugins can be slotted in accordance to how many sockets you have on your weapon, just like gems. The plugins can also roll from a 1-star to 5-star, 5-star being the strongest. The sockets you have on your weapon is also an RNG roll when crafting your weapon, and you can have anywhere from 1 to 4 sockets. When crafting a weapon, if you roll a great success, you'll have 2 to 4 sockets on that item. At the current endgame during the beta test, you'll continue to recraft your weapons in hopes that the next one will have the max sockets.
She's cute, isn't
When
she?
it
I
comes
think
to
she's
the
like
plugins
a
themselves, you
9,000-year-old
can
dragon.
remove them,
So
but you'll
she's
lose
legal.
that plugin. You can purchase a cash out item though that will allow you to remove the plugin and still keep it. The other thing that is
I'm definitely attached
monetized
to
will be
her.
the great
She's
success rate of your
she's
weapon.
very cool.
A great success, as I mentioned,
put something
will
in the
provide
Discord
you with
that
more
I
sockets
made for this-
and
for
a
the-
better
for this
affix
series.
attached. You'll be able to purchase an item that will allow you to increase the great success rate of your craft, bettering your odds for obtaining a more juiced weapon. And we're not done yet, because there are also socket increase tickets, but we did not have access to that. It's being speculated whether or not these will be obtainable in-game or via the cash shop as well. And while we're on the topic of monetization, the other feature that was in the game was the double loot from dungeons. You will be able to purchase tickets in the cash shop that will allow you double the rewards for your dungeons. You do not get double the plugins. It's also being speculated how and if we can get these tickets in game. As far as the pay to win mechanics in Blue Protocol go, I personally don't really care about having this in the game, but let's call it what it is. This is definitely a pay for power, pay to progress mechanic. I know this will stir up the debate of what the definition of pay to win means again, but you be ignorant if you don't believe that this will be considered pay to win amongst many people, regardless.
Huge debate when it comes to pay to win is whether or not only paying to be stronger is pay to win, or only in paying for time is also considered pay to win. I stand on, I think pay to progress is also, it all depends, right? In my opinion, if you all start in the same race, right, and you pay for a bike and the other guy has to run, I think you're still winning. And this is why I say this. A lot of people disagree with me whenever I say this, right? You're not maybe paying if for like a PvP standpoint. Some people say like, oh, if you're paying money and you get a better weapon, then you can destroy me in PvP, right? Then that's pay to win, right? If this game has no PvP, right, then some people may say, well, then there's no PvP. So there's no advantages that affects another player. But here's the thing. If you are paying for progress. You're not maybe paying for power over someone, but you are paying for a better experience than the other guy. And I think that's almost the same. As let's say I'm unable to afford to play the game. It's super hard, it's super difficult, and I'm having a hard time progressing, and the guy who's dropped like maybe $20 is having an easier time, or because he got gear that he's able to level up, then, you know, I believe even as Asmongold has mentioned it before, that if you were building a guild or you're going to a raid, who are they gonna invite? The guy who's barely muscling it through the campaign or whatever to be at that level, or the guy who paid money to get to that level faster and was able to get better gear at a sooner time and have a higher rate? Especially when you do the raid, that whatever maybe you paid for it gives better rates to cooperative players. That's still pay to win, regardless. Progression is fine, but being a top of the game and top end game player is locked behind a paywall, then there's a problem. Yeah, I can definitely see that, and that's what I was mentioning before. Like again, like if you're paying for progression, it's fine. Like or whatever. Like I don't care. I don't care, but there's some people that do care a lot about the progression system. I think it's all about like where you stand and how you view it as a whole, that ultimately deciphers, like, you know, your stance on the subject of pay to progress. But for me, like, yeah, if I really need to get through something, I really, like, for example, if I'm doing content with you guys, right, and obviously I'm not like some multi-millionaire, right, that's gonna cost me a bit of a penny. I may not be able to do that, but if I needed to get through something so I can bring out great content, then yeah, maybe I'll drop, you know, a few dollars. But the guy on the side of me who also has a full-time job can't get to that part for his content, well, you know, there's a bit of an issue there. And I mean, it's all about how you feel and how much you really enjoy the game. But definitely, like, if you're on, like, if there's some type of leaderboard and everybody up there are sharks, you know, then in whales, man, it's never a good look for the game.
Of how you may view it. Personally, I think it's moderate and tolerable at the moment. For me, the actual process of gearing up, upgrading your gear is honestly just a bit lackluster.
These bosses
regardless
so
of the
cool.
cash shop elements, in order to upgrade and or craft your gear,
I can't wait to
you'll
make
have
like
to
thumbnails
continue to farm mobs and harvest the materials. And while you can absolutely argue that that's the same principle for other MMOs, my opinion is that Blue Protocol's iteration of it is just a little bit boring. There's no way around this process either, because you have to have those specific mats for each piece of gear, and there's absolutely no trading or auction house in the game.
Wow,
there isn't
no
even
trading?
a sell feature in the game. You literally cannot even sell something to an NPC. This also makes me wonder if the plugin system is the ultimate end game after obtaining the highest level weapon and imagines. This in itself would be an issue for me, because having an endgame around what are essentially just gems seems very bland and unappealing from a gearing perspective. If nothing changes, the majority of your gameplay in Blue Protocol will consist of joining farm groups for whatever mob you need to be farming, or running around a zone for a long period of time harvesting resources. Also assuming we will have to continue recrafting weapons for better rolls, which certainly could not be the case, by the way, and dungeons would also be in the mix of things to grind. Now, upon hitting level 50, a lot could change. Everything could change, honestly. What we've seen in the beta test is not even the halfway point to the actual level cap, but the journey to level 20 has given us a general idea of the core elements of the game. The last concern that I have about the game is one that I do feel pretty confident that they will fix
chill
in
if
due
like
time,
you're just maybe streaming and you're just hanging out, having your relaxing time.
But there are some issues with performance a lot of players ran into. Memory leaks, drop frames, full screen window mode randomly changing, just to name a few. None of this is too alarming considering many new MMOs deal with these issues during its inception. But I am hoping that they can better optimize it quickly, because running around town with 15 FPS on medium settings with a pretty decent system is just not fun. The world boss fight was also nearly a slideshow for me, and any little flashy animation that was played would drop frames on my stream heavily unless I capped my frames out at 30, which feels terrible. Even the character selection screen for some reason would make my OBS and stream stutter into a full-on slideshow mode. I'm really hoping some of these concerns get addressed for our version of the game. There were, of course, other minor things that I had also experienced, so before rounding this video out, here's a list of some notes that I took along the way to provide additional feedback. Campaign and side quests can all be tracked with a glowing light thing that will lead you to where the quest objective is.
Like Black Desert,
this feature isn't available for adventure board missions. I'm not sure if this was by design to force players into finding locations themselves, but considering the adventure board missions is much more important than the actual quests themselves, I find it a bit inconsistent that the guide isn't available for it. The world map isn't amazing. When opening it up, you have to select a...
Like, you don't want to be caught, like, having to do the most important thing. Half the time, it's, like, especially if you're already having, like, a really big grind to get these objectives done, now you have to waste time even trying to figure out where the hell it is. It's like aggravating as hell. Like, you're gonna be playing a game on your second monitor and you're gonna have to like fucking pull up YouTube every single time you're trying to find something, and hope and God, at least if you, especially if you're in an early game and the game has just came out, that a content creator has not even put out content for it yet in order to help you, or a guide, and help you get to locating where the hell you need to go to. But to be completely fair, there's already probably Japanese content creators who are already building tutorials as we speak for when this game comes out. So honestly, I kind of like the farming, but it has to feel rewarding, and the drop rates can't be terrible, considering that he said earlier that it took him an hour to get a material with a drop buff. You should farm for me. No, I definitely think, let's just think this in a little bit of a retrospective, right? It's a beta, right? You know, obviously whenever a beta comes out, the last thing that some of these devs want is you being able to rush through the beta. Like, honestly, like, you got to keep in mind, content creators have a natural tendency to try to rush things all the time, especially when you're trying to come out with a review, come up with expectations or impressions videos or anything like, or especially if a guide, if anything, a guide. And I can see as a developer, especially if you're in Japan, you know how your player base is. Definitely, I can definitely see, I said definitely like 4 fucking times, but I can see them definitely 5 dropping the drop rate system to slow down your progression so you're not hitting 20 too fast, so that you're able to enjoy the beta instead of immediately running to your review and going, ah, God, this is so easy, this game sucks. Or, I mean, maybe they could have maybe they shot themselves in the fucking foot, because now you're, you know, they're saying that it's a little bit difficult. So who knows? People make guides like that for Be Saints. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Those guys are awesome. I mean, like, who make guides for like little small like farming stuff. It's always the guys like who have like not even a big following. They're like always like the 300 subscriber dudes who like don't even talk in their video. They just have text on it like this, and it's just like, yeah, you'll find it here, bro. And you're like, oh, thanks.
Region or city at the top of the screen to view that area rather than being able to zoom in or out. This makes it a bit confusing for new players not accustomed to the world, and will cause some confusion because they may not actually know where they are or where they need to go. You cannot track the location of a party member in the world map, only by minimap similar to adventure board missions. This makes no sense. They should 100% allow you to see the location of your party members on the map.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Multi-day buffs that are consumed aren't anywhere to be seen. Buffs you get in-game are only visible, but you aren't able to see the duration since you have no way to use your mouse,
they don't seem like
which brings me to the next one,
to fix.
Not being able to pull up the mouse cursor to navigate your main HUD feels a bit frustrating at first for an action MMO.
True.
Main story campaign cutscenes and dialogue are completely skippable, but side quests are not. Side quest dialogue you can only fast forward for whatever reason.
Especially if you're trying to
finally,
farm and get something
with
over.
No passive health regen and very punishing mob damage, I feel to help brand new players in the first few levels, provide them with extra pots to help ease them into the game. Dying constantly in the beginning of the game would not make for a great experience for new players, especially since you respawn back in with a weakness debuff and only 50% of your HP. Expecting new players to find a campfire to regain their HP at the beginning of the game is a bit too much in my opinion.
Yeah,
99% of the players won't even know there is a campfire that exists to begin with. Last thing I'm going to say is to remember what every successful game was like during its inception. Every game requires time to become a masterpiece.
That's what I'm saying.
Protocol is no different. It may have some issues, but it doesn't mean it can't become that staple game. But it can be one over an extended period of time if they have the right team running it. We don't know too much about the team that's running Blue Protocol, and we're certainly not used to getting AAA MMO titles from Japan. Based off of the feedback that they've already given, their communication, just their actions in general,
they've been super
lead me to believe that they do have a pretty good team.
They've been
over
super
there.
communicative,
Balls in their
man.
court. Let's see what they can do with it. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you guys found it insightful. If you have any other questions, just
that's so awesome. I'm gonna link the video, guys. Go watch the video.